Not to delay us too long, seek to make a start on this, the final session of today, our capacity building day. And we're going to hear again from ICANN. We'll get a little bit more into more detail about DNSSEC, focusing on its importance for financial institutions, which is an important part of the economy of the Virgin Islands. The presenter is Mr. Albert Daniels, the ICANN Senior Manager for Stakeholder Engagement for the Caribbean. We introduced him fully earlier, so we'll just ask, with this short introduction, bring him to the podium and welcome him.
Thank you very much, Nigel. So while the presentation comes up, we had a discussion, what should ICANN talk about here at this meeting? And I said to Nigel, well, what do I do to get the business community to come out? How do I get Deloitte and BDO to come to this meeting? And he said, well, okay, all you do is just put the word financial in the title of your presentation. So I did that. So I'm going to give this presentation entitled DNSSEC for Financial Institutions. And also at the end, it's directly related to the KSK rollover. But in honesty, this presentation really could be for any type of organization and definitely for individuals, because I'm really going to cover two simple points. The first point is I'm going to introduce you to a technology that makes the internet a little bit safer, particularly for financial transactions. Is there anybody in here who does online banking? Let me see, show of hands. Online banking? Okay. Whose hands are missing? Okay, Sebastian doesn't do online banking. So almost everybody. You were late. Okay, it went up eventually. So the idea is anybody who does online banking should have an interest in ensuring that their financial institution, their ISP, and everybody in the chain of trust actually is familiar with DNSSEC and that it is working as it should. And if it is not working, this is where the multi-stakeholder model comes in. Normally when I talk about DNSSEC, well, I don't see any in the room. I normally speak to the ISPs. And I say to them, look, guys, I am going to be talking to the community about DNSSEC, and by the time I'm finished talking to them, they're going to be coming to you to ask you whether you have DNSSEC implemented. So please prepare yourself, because you play a critical role in deploying DNSSEC, and this whole room of people that I'm talking to are going to come straight to you as soon as I'm finished talking to them. So there are different organizations that have a role to play, and you, the community, you, the end user, you, the businesses, really, after you hear what I have to say, might decide that really you want to check to find out whether or not your ISP has deployed DNSSEC. Now, the other thing that we spoke about this morning when I spoke about ICANN is I told you that we work very closely with technical partners and other partners. And this is particularly the case when it comes to the work that ICANN does in the area of internet security. You will not hear ICANN going as deeply into broad areas of cybersecurity, for example, as you may hear ISOC doing, because what we do at ICANN is we try to keep a very narrow focus on the areas within our mandate. My background is technical, and of course, I've seen the dark side as an IT and security auditor with KPMG. And my friend here from the Information Systems Association would know what I'm talking about. We audit firms, and invariably what we discover is that the weak link in this whole security problem is what? Is the human being. I mean, the systems have the capacity to be locked down as tightly as you can, but then when you have a system that's locked down with the most complicated password, and then you have an end user writing that password down and sticking it, worst case scenario, on a post-it on the screen. If it's not there, we IT auditors, we know where to find it. It's on the first page of the diary, or it's on the post-it under the keyboard. And there are a couple other places that I won't tell you about unless you go looking for people's passwords there. But really, it's about the human being, and the human being understanding why their behavior needs to change when it comes to information security. At KPMG, all staff used to be sent to me for an hour before they got their user IDs and passwords. And this should be the case really with all accounting firms, so that they have a full appreciation of the importance of information security. Because you're not just dealing with your own information, you're dealing with the information of all of your hundreds of clients. Well, I don't know whether Deloitte has more clients than BDO, but how many of our clients, you don't have any clients at all at BDO? How many clients you have, you really want to be sure that their financial data is secure. And there's certain things that we don't really think about much, like, for example, sending faxes. Are we making sure, those of us who still send faxes, that the person that we are sending this confidential data to at the hotel is actually standing at the fax machine? Do we check to make sure that they are there by telephone before we send the fax? Photocopying. Does anybody still do photocopying? How many times have you gone to the photocopy machine and you open up to make your photocopy and there's a sheet of paper lying in there from somebody else's copy before? Anything to do with technology? No. Human behavior. I remember being on a, wait for it, Liat flight some time ago. It doesn't happen as often as it used to, Shannon. I fly some other different airlines besides leave individuals absolutely traumatized. Sorry, Leeward Islands Air Transport. And the gentleman behind me was just flying home to his home, but he was an IT guy. And he was talking behind me to his client about all of their security infrastructure. By the time the flight was over, I knew everything I needed to know if I was a hacker about his environment. He had no consideration for the fact of his location. And we do the same thing in elevators, on buses, on trains, in restaurants. We are not aware of who is sitting around. And let me tell you, it doesn't take much for a hacker to get all the information that he needs, just by being in the right place at the right time. I mean, simple things like going through doors. I mean, we see it on television all the time. You want to get into a place, you stand by the door, and you wait for Roxanne to come through. She enters her code, she goes through, you put your foot in the door, you just walk in behind her. Human behavior. That's what we need to change. We need to understand what the risks are so that we can change our human behavior. So coming back to what ICANN does, we focus on security related to the domain name system. And why is this important? I mean, what's happening? We heard it here in the last panel. We're putting more data on the internet. We're putting health data on the internet. The amount of data that we're putting on the internet is growing. The big players should be paying, more because they're using all of this data for gain. And what are the stats? Well, this slide tells you the digital universe is doubling in size every 2 years, and by 2020, according to who is this? According the source is quoted, so you'll see it on the slide. The data that we create and copy annually will reach 44 zettabytes. I didn't even know that was a word. What is a zettabyte? 44 trillion gigabytes. I remember when I worked on the first IBM PC, let me tell you, this thing had a 10 megabyte hard drive that took up the whole case. And I said to myself, but why did they even invent this? Nobody will ever use 10 megabytes, a whole 10 megabyte hard drive. How long do you have to be typing to put data on it? Now we're talking about zettabytes. But the point is clear, and then you can read the rest of the slide to see what it means in terms of how much data that really is. But why is the internet growing and being important to my business? And the auditors are not just looking at this for themselves, but they're looking at this for their clients. And the rest of you who are in private enterprise will understand what's going on here. Why is the internet important to my business? First of all, it expands trade. And this first one, I think, is BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, indicated in a 2014 study that 30% of global GDP is contributed to by trade. The internet is important to us from a business perspective because of the contribution to trade and the impact on GDP. Why is it important with regard to growing business? Because not only does the internet grow technology business, but this second statistic, 75% of the businesses that benefit from growth due to the internet are not even technology-related businesses. Those are traditional businesses. So yeah, some of us, we do web development or or we do projects related to IT, but those are not even the only ones that are growing. 75% of the businesses which benefit from the growth of the internet are non-traditional, not non-technological businesses, but really the traditional businesses. And of course, in any business, you want to expand your reach. And this last stat from Cisco from 2015 indicates that by 2019, there will be about 3.9 billion internet users, which is estimated to be half of what the population would be by then, 7.6 billion. So these are some of the reasons why the internet is important to business. We use it often. It does a lot for us. And you saw a similar slide to this. I think Shannon had a slide up like this, just telling you what happens on the internet in 1 minute. And the numbers jump out at you. 31.5 million Facebook messages are posted in 1 minute. 350,000 tweets in 1 minute. So people are using the internet. They're using Facebook. They're using domain names. And we need to see how we can protect ourselves. So here is the thing. Every single device that is connected to the internet, and I see several in front of me right now, needs a unique identifier. And typically that identifier is, first of all, an IP address. IP stands for Internet Protocol. So whether it be a laptop, a tablet, your smartphones, well, my phone is not so smart, but your phones, whatever it is that's connected to the internet, it must have an IP address. But the problem with that is that as human beings, we don't remember numbers, as Shannon said, as well as we remember names. If I want to go to Jacqueline, I go to shannon.com. It's easy for me to remember shannon.com. I will not remember 192.168.something.something, and far worse, I will not remember these new IPv6 addresses that are far longer. So we have this domain name system where we can type in some English words, which then gets converted into the IP address. That is the domain name system, converting domain names into IP addresses. And there is the problem. Because if you can jump into the middle of that translation and say that Jacqueline is staying at lance.com when really she's actually staying at shannon.com, then you can get a benefit that you would not normally get if you went to the correct place. So we need to lock down this DNS system, because when you want to do your online banking, where do you want to go? You want to go to your bank. You do not want to go to a hacker's website. Because what are you going to do when you go to your bank's website? You're going to type in your username and your password. You don't want to be typing in any usernames and any passwords when you're going to a hacker website. But we'll see, the mechanics of how that creates a problem. So what is DNSSEC? DNSSEC stands for Domain Name System Security Extensions. And it is a protocol that is meant to make that conversion process of name to IP address a little bit more secure. We know how the internet was developed. It was developed in a very open environment. Nobody ever thought there would be fraud. Nobody ever thought that the internet would be used for business. It was a big surprise, that the internet ended up being used for business. And of course, the protocols needed to secure the internet were not built in by default. So DNSSEC is one of these protocols which was developed subsequently to help make the DNS system a little bit more secure. Does anybody recognize this particular website? National Bank of the Virgin Islands? No? Nobody? You're kidding me, right? Okay, you're just afraid to say it. Okay. All right. So this is what the DNS does. It converts names into IP addresses. If every time you wanted to see how much money you had in the bank, you had to remember a long IPv6 address, you would never go to the National Bank of the Virgin Islands website, because you would never remember the IP address. But you can remember nationalbank.vg easily, and you go there, and then the DNS system will convert what you type, that domain name, into the IP address so that your computer can get connected to your bank's computer. And this DNS conversion is not only used for websites, but it's also used in email and several other areas. And it's used by systems that sometimes we don't even think about. Anytime you go to a website using a browser, you are relying on the honesty of the DNS. There are many passport systems, even our own, passport systems in the Eastern Caribbean. I mean, we use Google all the time. We buy things on eBay. We use PayPal all the time. Anytime you use a domain name to go to paypal.com to pay your bills or amazon.com to order something, even the RSA token systems, all of those rely on the honesty of the DNS. And if hackers can get the DNS to tell lies, then we have a problem. And where does DNSSEC fit in? Because computers have gotten faster, and the time that it takes to do that conversion from domain name into IP address is now longer in terms of computing time, hackers have found a way to execute man-in-the-middle attacks. So you ask for bankofthevirginislands.com or .vg, a computer somewhere else on the internet has to respond. If a hacker can jump in the middle before you get that official response and say, you want to go to Bank of Virgin Islands? Hey, I know the IP address, here is it. And if he gets you to come to his website, then that is where the problem is. So what DNSSEC does is it adds a layer of cryptography, a layer of authentication in the response to your question about what is the web address, what is the IP address for a particular website. And the problem of man-in-the-middle attacks is not trivial. This is one of the better known attacks that happened some time ago. The DNS changer attack, where people were trying to go to one website and they got to a different one. It was a global attack. It affected 100 countries of the world. 4 million machines were affected. 14 million US dollars of fraud actually were perpetrated. And it's true. Somebody said the banks don't tell you when they've been hacked. I can tell you that is true. Because I got the call one time. It was from my bank. He says, Mr. Daniels, we're pleased to inform you that we have a new credit card ready for you. Please tell us when you can come into the bank to collect it. I said, what do you mean you have a new card for me? I didn't request a new card. They said, no, we have some new cards for you. And they never went into the details. Somebody was on the chair of the Bankers Association was on the news last night because the rumor had gotten out saying, oh no, our system is secure and everything is fine, nothing is wrong at all, your money is safe. But then when I went a little bit deeper, what I discovered is that one of our regional institutions had actually been hacked in a very big way. And that was a regional institution that was not just the back end for one credit card, but for credit cards that were used throughout the region. There was a block of them that was compromised, so they decided to reissue literally thousands of cards. Okay, so it happens, and there are several ways that it can happen, but we won't go into that. So in the perfect world, this is how the DNS is supposed to work. You want to do your online banking, you want to go to majorbank.vg. So you type in majorbank.vg, but then the DNS system has to come back to you and come back to your computer and tell your computer what the IP address for that bank is. And typically, if we're at home, we go through our ISPs, our internet service provider, which you can consider to be your DNS resolver, whether it's Flow or Digicel or whoever it is. So the first place you go is to your ISP and you ask them, where is majorbank.vg? And they may not know it at that point, so they need to send you up the chain. So they go up the chain, and eventually they get to a DNS server, which actually knows the IP address for the place that you need to go. So let's say major bank is 1.2.3.4. So the next step is that the DNS resolver, the ISP, finds a server that knows where the website is, and then that server sends the IP address back to the ISP, and the ISP then sends that IP address to your browser. So what happens? Your browser opens up, and it says, okay, I want to go to Internet Computer at 1.2.3.4. You then go to your bank's web server, and your bank's web server sends you back the login page, that login page that we saw a little bit earlier. What do you do then? You put in your username and your password at your bank's web server, and then you get your account data back. If it's the case of Shernan, you'll see how many millions of dollars you have in the bank. But if it's my account that's being checked, I'll see how badly I am in overdraft. All right, but in any case, your password goes in, you get your account data back. And the ISPs now try to make things work better for us, so they actually do something called caching. So if Shannon and I are banking at the same bank, once Shannon goes in first to check his millions, and the data gets sent to the ISP. Uh-huh. Oh, yes. Oh, it's Sebastian that has the millions, not you. Okay. So the first time Sebastian goes to his bank, and Sebastian and I happen to be using the same bank, the ISP is going to get the information for where to find majorbank.vg. So when I come in later to see how broke I am, and I ask the ISP for the website for majorbank.vg, the process doesn't go all the way up to the DNS server, because the ISP has cached the response, and the ISP knows that the bank is at 1.2.3.4, and I see how broke I am. So here enters the hacker. And the hacker has his hacking website at 5.6.7.8. And Bevel now is trying to go to the same bank that we all use. It's the Internet Bank of Internet Guys. And he goes to the DNS server, but see what happens. Vance, who we know is the hacker, is able to get a response to the ISP in saying that majorbank.vg can be located at 5.6.7.8 before the proper response can actually come through. So the ISP says, oh, okay, great, I got an answer. I know where the bank is. It's at 5.6.7.8. The ISP now sends that information to poor Bevel. And Bevel's browser thinks that the bank can be located at 5.6.7.8. Of course, eventually, the server sends the correct information to the ISP. But the ISP is not concerned anymore. If I ask Roxanne, how do I get to the hotel? And she tells me, turn left and go down the road. I will turn left and I'll start going down the road. But if Gregor comes to me afterwards with the correct information, by that time I'm not concerned about any other answer. I've already received one answer. So in this case, the hacker has gotten information down to Bevel, saying that his bank is at 5.6.7.8. What happens on Bevel's computer? He goes to this IP address, and he gets to the hacker's website. From the hacker's website, he will get a website that looks exactly like the bank's website in all aspects: color, form, fonts, everything. It'll even have the little yellow padlock in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So what is poor Bevel going to do? He's going to type in his username and his password. And that username and password will then be received by a website that says, error, you made a mistake. And Bevel really wants to get at his account, so he doesn't think that anything went wrong. He thinks to himself, maybe instead of typing an I in my password, I typed an E or something like that. Because eventually, the second time around, he gets to his bank website. But in the meantime, what has happened? He has typed in his username and password into the hacker site, and the hacker has harvested this precious information. And remember the caching that the ISP does to make everything go faster? Because the ISP now thinks that the bank's website is 5.6.7.8. So when all of the rest of us who use the same bank go to that ISP and ask for the bank's website, all of our usernames and passwords get harvested by the hacker. And this is not any sci-fi or anything. This is a very simple, exploit that is being used using cache poisoning in the case of the caches, and it's happening to us right now. And the whole idea is that DNSSEC is actually meant to prevent this thing from happening. And this is how DNSSEC works when it's properly implemented. Bevel will come, and Bevel will go to the ISP, and he will ask for his bank's website. The request will go to the appropriate server. The hacker will attempt to send information to the ISP with the bogus IP address for Bevel's bank. But if the ISP is running DNSSEC validation, if it's looking for the cryptography on that DNS information, it will realize that this information that it got by the hacker has not been signed by ICANN at the root. It has not been signed by the appropriate cryptography coming from the bank's website. So it will actually drop that packet, and it will not pass that packet on. So if DNSSEC is working, and the ISP is actually looking at the DNSSEC data and running validation, when the bogus information comes in, the packet will simply drop, and the bad data will not get past the ISP. If DNSSEC is off, the bad data will get past the ISP, as we saw in the first example. So the ISP now will now have enough time to receive the authentic response from the bank's website, and basically it will do the same thing. It will check the cryptography on that response. Okay, did ICANN sign this at the root? Yes. Did the bank's web server sign it properly? Yes. Okay, then and only then will I pass it on to Bevel. So the correct bank's website gets passed on, and then the world is at peace. So at a very simple level, this is what we are talking about. We are talking about the chain of trust being signed at every level. ICANN should sign at the root to make sure that at the very top of the internet, the information that is coming through is authentic information. The bank's web server, whoever is hosting the web server for your company, for your financial institution, for your credit union, they should also sign. Critical in the loop is the internet service provider. The internet service provider must be, first of all, allowing the DNSSEC traffic to pass through so that DNSSEC validation can be run, so that this checking process takes place. Because you're getting two sets of data. You're getting bad data from the hacker, and you're getting authentic data from the bank's web server. So your ISP needs to be able to distinguish between the two, and it does that by deploying DNSSEC. And then you enter the username and password, and like I said, at that point, the world is at peace, and the same thing happens with the caching. The ISP would only cache the appropriate information. So that essentially is the business case for deploying DNSSEC. If there's anybody in here who would like to have a safe online experience when it comes to financial transactions, then you should be concerned about whether or not your ISP has deployed DNSSEC. And I think that means every single one of us inside here. You don't need to be a financial institution like BDO or Deloitte. Sorry, guys, but I had to get you into the room so I could tell you this. All right? But you have hundreds of clients who can now bring this message to. All of your clients and you should be putting pressure on your ISPs, on ICANN, on everybody, on your web developer, on your web hosting provider, to ensure that each of them at the different points in the chain sign the DNSSEC keys and ensure that everything is secure. So Vint Cerf, who was one of the fathers of the internet, actually made the comment that DNSSEC is the biggest security upgrade to the internet infrastructure in over 20 years. That's how big DNSSEC is. And that adds to the seriousness of why we should be ensuring that DNSSEC is properly deployed. Now, like I mentioned this morning, we work with partners, and although DNSSEC is a big issue for ICANN, ISOC has a tremendously valuable program called Deploy 360, and you can just Google Deploy 360, or Shannon can tell you what the domain name is for that website, but it covers the deployment of several technologies, one of which is DNSSEC. So I remember Justin from Belize was saying one of the problems in dealing with getting uptake in the deployment of these technologies is that companies, ISPs, they're not sure what to do. And I think I have that on one of these slides. So Deploy 360 from ISOC goes a very long way in terms of telling you what the steps are for deploying, so that you will be in a position of having had some capacity building to get this done properly. And no, Shannon did not pay me to say that. So Sebastian, you can still give him that raise. It was so good that I had to talk about it. Good, Shannon, we good? Okay. So what is the problem? IT departments either don't know what this DNSSEC is, or they are putting in all of their effort in putting out fires. As an IT manager, I can tell you our best day in the office as an IT manager is when your phone does not ring, when the world is at peace. That's a fantastic day. But on a normal day, you're solving this problem, somebody's printer is not working, did you turn it on? Because that counts as not working as well, right? Not turning it on. But you're fighting all of these fires, and so you don't have time to do important things like learn how to deploy DNSSEC. And then when you ask other people, you get this a lot from ISPs, you get FUD. Can anybody tell me what FUD stands for? Somebody, there must be somebody here who knows what FUD stands for. FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Thank you, Jacqueline. And so people like when they're comfortable. They don't like change because it means they have to learn new things. They have to configure new things. So look, the thing is working. My online banking is working. What do you tell me now about this DNSSEC foolishness? Okay, just leave me in peace. Okay, so you get that a lot from the IT departments. Unfortunately, ISPs may also think that, oh, they want me to spend more money, so my profits are going to go down. So this is it. And sometimes it's a chicken and egg problem. What do? Who can implement DNSSEC? Enterprises within, their internal networks, TLD operators, and these are CCTLDs, as well as those who run the generic top-level domains. Domain name holders, if you have registered your own domain and people are going to be coming through, you're doing some online commerce, you're selling, I don't know, crochet, or you're selling rum. That's a good one. You're selling rum from Tortola, and you at some point you're going to be collecting money. You don't want somebody going to somebody else's website. You don't want them coming to Albert Daniels' website from St. Lucia selling rum, when what they're trying to buy is some good Tortolan rum. Okay, you want to make sure that when they put in the website for your company, that they get to your website and not to somebody else's website. So if you have a domain name, you want to make sure that DNSSEC is deployed. Your hosting provider. To get a website, you need 3 parts. You need somebody to build a website for you, you need a domain name, and you need a company to host that website for you, whether it's done locally or whether you get it hosted by GoDaddy or one of these companies. So whoever is hosting your website, whether you're a financial institution or any other kind of institution, that you need to ask them, do you have DNSSEC actually deployed on your website? So that's the first part of it. Hopefully I've convinced you that you need to have this thing deployed, DNSSEC, and you also need to make sure that your ISP and everybody along the chain actually have DNSSEC deployed. So having convinced you to deploy DNSSEC and you went and you put in all of this thing, I'm now telling you as ICANN that I'm changing the top-level DNSSEC password. So if you've deployed DNSSEC, then you need to make sure that you're ready for the password change, okay? So this is the second part of the presentation, what we refer to as the KSK rollover. So the thing about it is, when DNSSEC was originally deployed back in 2010, the intention was to change that top key, the top password that's used to validate the entire DNS system, DNSSEC system, in 6 years' time. So that 6 years has finally arrived, and the actual date is the 11th of October, 2017. Just like the actual date for this eclipse was today, some minutes ago. So that is the date when that top password on DNSSEC is actually going to be changed. And we have no problem with that, right? Because we do it all the time. The auditors will tell you need to change your passwords every 30 or 60 days, and don't change it from your car's name 1234 to your car's name 5678. You change it to something reasonable, as Shannon told you earlier. But the whole idea is that this change is happening, and it's happening because it's important to change your password every so often. One of the things that we study when we're doing IT security and IT audit is we study all of the different ways that someone can get your password. And many of them have, like I said, nothing to do with technology. So I want to get Roxanne's password. What do? On day 1, I just, stand or sit close to her when she's typing her passwords, and I listen. I listen to hear how many keystrokes that she types when she's putting in her password. Okay, 5 keystrokes. So then I come up with a plan. Okay, I need to get 5 characters. So I make my plan. Okay, next week, I'm going to try to get the first 2 characters. So next week, I stand behind Roxanne when I know she's about to log in. I look over her shoulder and she goes, boom, boom. After she does the first 2, I turn around and I continue my business like nothing happened, because you don't want to make it too obvious. And let me tell you, you may think that I'm telling you this. Why am I telling you this? Because then you learn how to hack. You need to know what the hackers do so you can protect yourself against it. Let me just finish getting Roxanne's password. So the first 2 days, I've got the 2 characters, and I leave her alone for a while, because if she sees me standing up behind her every time she's logging in, she'll figure it out. So I leave her alone for a while, and then next week I know, okay, I don't have to look for the first 2 because I got those already. I'm waiting for the last 3. All right, and she goes boom, boom, I look away, and then she goes boom, 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 and I pay attention, and that's it. I'm done. I have her password. So even with all of the security and all of the DNSSEC and everything, if I have her password to begin with, then I can bypass all of that security. So the whole idea is, if you have the discipline of changing your credentials for logging in frequently, then again, you reduce the risk a little bit of somebody using that kind of approach to actually getting your password. Jackie's? Unless? Okay, so I've yeah, that's exactly what I said earlier. Under the keyboard in different places. So this is what you do with those kinds of passwords. All right, please, people, because I've taught thousands of people, because I used to teach IT as well, and I love talking about how you set a password. Please set passwords that you can remember, so that you do not have to write them down. And I'm telling you, in the next verse of the same song, please set a very complex password. So you're going to tell me, well, Albert, you're talking out of 2 sides of your mouth. How do you set a complex password if you're telling me not to write it down? So this is how you do it. There are different things that you can do. How do you set a complex password? You add complexity, first of all, by using case complexity. Have a mix of case, uppercase and lowercase, in places where you don't expect to see the case complexity. Usually you don't have a capital letter in the middle of a word. Okay, 3rd character, 4th character, you put that capital letter in somewhere. And something that's done a lot is you change some of the letters, you change some of the numbers, you change some of the letters that look like numbers into numbers. So where you'd have an O, you put in a 0. Where you'd have an I, you put in a 1, and that kind of thing. Where you would have an E, you put in the number 3 because it looks like an E backwards. Those are 2 things. Also, mix letters with numbers in your password. So Mary 1234 is kind of complex-ish, but not complex enough. It gets more complex if you put a capital M or a capital Y at the end of Mary, and then you have the number. That's 2 parts of the complexity. You can add another layer of complexity by putting in special characters. Show of hands. How many of your passwords start with spaces? Let's start with spaces. How many of your passwords start with semicolons? Okay? We don't normally think. Good. No, I'm not. I'm not, but you were paying attention. That's good. You were paying attention to Bevil's video. Very good. So the whole idea is that there are other little things which are easy to do and easy to remember, which would allow you to have a complex password that you don't have to write down. You can use phrases, but you can use the phrases in different ways. Arsenal is the best football team, if you like football. Okay, so if you like, okay, so maybe what would you prefer me to say? Manchester United? Yeah. Okay, Manchester United is the best football team. That is something that this gentleman will never forget, that Manchester United is the best football team. So you know you're going to remember that, but what do you do with that phrase? Maybe you take the first letter of every word in that phrase or the last letter of every word in that phrase, and either you use them as is or you capitalize them or you use them in some way, and then you add to that the player number for your favorite player on the team. It gets a little bit more complex. Or if you're putting words together, I mean, I remember I had, yes, and this is from Bevan's video as well, I had a password that was cement sandwich. Usually you would never have those two words that close to each other unless you're kind of crazy and you're eating concrete sandwiches or something. Words that don't relate to each other, you never put in a you can put in a password together because normally they would not be next to each other. And the other things that you try to avoid is never use any word that you can find in a dictionary. And I mean any dictionary. I had this Dutch guy working for me one time, but what he didn't know was that I spoke a few words of Dutch. And he was working in my IT department, so I had to, run some tests, and I was able to discover that one or two of his passwords were actually simple Dutch words. And I called him in and I spoke to him. I told him, no, this is too simple. Yes, it is a Dutch word, but somebody can figure it out. All right, so don't use anything that you will find in a dictionary. So anything else, Jacqueline, on passwords? Or are we good with the passwords? You think you can set a password without writing it down now? You think you can set a password without writing it down now? Yeah, maybe?
Not me.
Okay. Other people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let him use the mic. Jack, it's right there.
Yes, if, for example, my credit card, the first 4 digits, I will take one of those 4 digits and add
something
a fixed number, a constant key.
That's from
the
video,
second
right?
number, I'll add another constant C. The third number, I'll add another constant D. And the fourth number in the sequence, so let's say it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
That sounds like I would have to write it down.
No. You remember it, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I'm adding the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 blocks. So the first digit, I add 1 to.
One to it.
The second digit in the second sequence, I'll add 2
to it. The
third digit, I will add. Now I could do it anywhere. I could do it forward. I could do it backward.
So the moral of that story is that he will remember that, and he doesn't need to write it down. And that is the point. So coming back to all of this, if I can get my slides back, the whole idea was that that's one of the reasons why it's important to change a password, because sometimes you can do things to figure it out. So if I go hacking his password now, I know what sort of algorithm that I need to be using. So, but if he changes and he uses a different algorithm, then things are going to be a little bit more difficult to crack. So ICANN is changing the password for the DNSSEC system, and these are some timelines. On the 11th of October this year is when the change actually takes place. And then there is a little bit more time before the old keys are taken out of the root completely. If by that time you've deployed DNSSEC and you haven't made sure your system is updated, essentially that will be the equivalent of turning off the internet for your customers. And as an ISP, I don't think that that's something that you would want to do. So who is this KSK rollover going to affect? The usual suspects, of course, the techies, the DNS software developers and distributors, the system integrators. But very importantly, it will affect the network operators, like your ISPs and so on. It will affect the root server operators. There's some technical people who run what we call root servers, those computers that give the information back, the IP address for the website that you're trying to go to, the ISPs, and very importantly, this last block, end users. All of the persons who use the internet for anything at all are going to be affected if they're working with a provider who has not done what is necessary with regard to updating their system to make sure that it can comply with the KSK rollover. So what do the operators need to do? They need to be aware of DNSSEC, first of all, and how it's working on their servers. They need to be aware of how the trust is evaluated on their system, and they can actually do some tests. And ICANN has set up a test bed for ISPs and network operators to go in and run some checks on their own system to see if their system is ready for this KSK rollover. And there are help desks that are set up in case ISPs and network operators and others have problems in terms of preparing themselves for either a manual rollover or an automated rollover. This website right here, you can maybe make a note of it, go.icann.org/KSK test. This is the test bed that ICANN has set up for allowing ISPs and others to check to see if their system is ready. I am aware that Aaron also has set up a test bed for their clients that can be used, to check to make sure that they are ready. And if there are problems, there are also steps that you can take to recover, because nobody likes to be without internet. So there are lots of places where you can get further details, of course, within ICANN and outside. You can simply ask a question to globalsupport@icann.org. So if you want more details on anything that I've spoken about here today, you can just send an email to that address and you can get updated information. You can join mailing lists. And of course, you can attend various events where ICANN is talking about this KSK rollover. So that is it for me and DNSSEC. I could see some of you trembling a little bit. So I think I've done my job. And I'm happy to take any questions. Mm-hmm.
I have a comment. The local Scotiabank here has upgraded their banking system, and they have sent the users a little thing looking like a jump drive, which has a key in it. So every time you go to log on now, you have to press this button on it, and it gives you a new random number. So is that the way the world is going to go?
Can I get the slides back, please? What you're referring to is something that we call an RSA token. It's a little device, it fits on your keyring, but every minute the 6-character code on that device changes. And that is synced with a security server. So the security server knows what that 6-character code is supposed to be. So if you put in your username and password, but you put in the wrong code, then you will not get access to your bank. And this is where I have a problem with some of our regional financial institutions. I can say this because I won't be calling any names. They are indigenous banks. And there are some indigenous banks that use a particular back-end system for online banking, and they use that trifactor authentication: username, password, and RSA token. Slides? So this is what the device is. It looks like this, all right? This goes onto your keyring, but this number here changes every minute to a different number. So you not only enter your username and your password, but you also enter the code that comes on there. So if you don't have the token, you can't get into your online banking. And the problem that I have is that there's some banks that are using it, others who are using the same online software are not using it. So how is it that your bank requires that I use the RSA token, and my bank is using the same software as your bank, but all they're taking is a username and password? Go figure. I'm not going to say anything more about that. So like you said, I'm happy you said that your bank uses the RSA token, so we're not saying anything bad about the name of that company that you happen to mention on public television that the whole world just heard. All right? Jacqueline?
Okay. When I had asked you about people forgetting their
Sorry.
passwords and writing it over.
So to answer your question, the RSA token is an added layer of security for logging in, but it is not by itself DNSSEC. Sorry.
Right. So where I was hoping that we would go with that is the change in the NIST standards for password things, because all those very complex numerical, special character, and so on were done by Bill Burr in 2003. And he very recently said that, Lord, he regretted it. And the new NIST guidelines basically say, 1, do not demand people that they change their password every 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but only after some potential or you've seen that a breach may have occurred. So people keep their password until you say, okay, you know what, I think somebody's been poking around here. Let's make everybody change their password. So you don't have that continual trying your best every 90 days to find something that is memorable, but it's not sounding like the one you had before, and so on and so forth and so forth. So, and they also say about the passwords that they should be longer, like phrase-based, things that you remember, because now I've given my mom the story. She is using the first line of her favorite poem. I know I'm not telling you who her favorite poet is. But it's so much easier for her to remember because she's known this poem since she was 10 or 11 years old, and it's just stuck in her head. So she can use lines from that. And even if I give her her name and her birth date with capitals and special characters and the 3 for the E and all that, she just writes it down, you know.
Yeah. And you absolutely correct from this perspective. The first thing that you're taught in security is that you don't put $1 million fence around a stack of quarters. You don't go and overdose yourself on spending money. You know, this guy from ICANN, he came and he told us about all these things. You assess the risk first. You know, what are the potential problems that you could have? What data do you have stored on this device? Is it data that could cause you to lose your life or could cause you to lose millions of dollars? Or is it just, you know, your top 20 football players or athletes? Right? So you assess the vulnerabilities, you assess what you stand to lose, and then the security solution that you come up with, which is usually layered. You do different things to try to mitigate the risk. It should be appropriate for the data that you're trying to protect. I remember auditing this regional utility one time, and when I went into the systems, I saw that the passwords were set for 4 characters to one user in there. So obviously I asked the questions, why aren't the passwords set to 6 characters with all this complexity and so on? And then they sat me down and they said, you know, that's Mrs. Jones's password. She is 73 years old and she will never remember a password that is more than 4 characters. So the next question I asked was, well, what systems does she have access to? And as it turned out, she didn't have any access to any high value information. So I said, you know what? It doesn't meet the criteria, but I'll let it slide. Because what you stand to lose if somebody finds out her password, which could very possibly be 1, 2, 3, 4, is not going to affect the financial health of the institution. So Jacqueline, that was a very important point in terms of understanding what you have to lose if something goes wrong and choosing an appropriate solution to protect the assets that you don't want to lose.
More people should look, because they require everybody. Often IT departments require everybody to go through the same drama and do the same thing, which makes it a lot less secure, because that's when you find the sticky note on the monitor, under the desk, in a notebook. And
in the diary, the first page of the diary.
People need to start thinking about security with regard to the risk versus the risk of one versus the risk of the other.
It's a simple one. This is a big one. I worked as a contractor years ago with the Department of State at the federal government. And the lady who was, she was the assistant to the senior assistant, the Deputy Secretary of State. Old lady, she was there for many, many years. And they insisted that her password never changed from love, L-O-V-E. And we had to do it because the Deputy Secretary of State, who was the second highest ranking individual in the Department of State, said that's what you do. And that was the first time we actually got into this triage about what is the risk associated with that. So it works. Yeah,
that's very important. And always remember that security is layered. No one solution will solve every security problem. And the jury's out on whether or not you can ever solve your security problems entirely, but at least you make it more difficult. So you put up a fence, you put up an alarm system, you get, some pit bulls, and you have to go through layers. It's like, these superhero stories where you have to go through the 7 challenges before you can get the power. So you put different blocks that they have to get through before they get to the promised land. Ashel?
Hi. I think Carlton touched on...
who are you?
Sorry. Ashel Ford, Internet End User.
Thank you.
I think Carlton touched on something that's really important, and that's that oftentimes people who are in a position of power in organizations don't understand the risks that decisions that they make carry. And because they're in a position of power, people who do understand the risks are often afraid to challenge them. And this is a problem because I don't think that you reach to the point where you're a CEO of a large organization and you're a fool. There are clearly intelligent people. They're clearly able to understand certain concepts and function in public and walk and chew gum at the same time. The issue is that they have not been educated in something that is not their forte, that is not their area of expertise. And this is a problem because it is when a user comes to me, I'm the network administrator, and says, I have my iPad that I bought from the random guy down the road, and I want you to install the company's email on this iPad. I tell them, no, full stop. And that's the end of my response to you. But when the CEO comes to me and says, I just bought this Samsung Galaxy Tab when I went to my trip in China, and I'd like you to put the company's email on it, I said, yes, sir. I'll do it right away, sir. Right? So there needs to be cybersecurity training that is targeted to different groups of users, right? And especially management, so that the PS understands that the decisions he makes affects the security right down the organization to Susie who works at the front desk.
Yeah, and just let me relate to that. And I experienced this when I was IT manager at KPMG. Just for your information, I had 8 bosses when I worked at KPMG. Antigua, Anguilla partners, St. Vincent 2 partners, St. Lucia partner, St. Vincent partner. And in addition to that, there were some other people who were bosses, but there was one boss who I called God. His name was Anders Ling, and he was in charge of security. And the reason why the partners didn't like me is that whatever he said with regard to security had to be accepted whether you were a clerk or whether you were at the partner level. So when the partners would come to me and say the same thing, look, I want to, I want you to put the company email on this new Samsung phone. I would have to say to him, no, you can't do it because the KPMG standard at the time is the BlackBerry, so you will use a BlackBerry. Let me tell you, I mean, my bonus got delayed and all this kind of thing. They did not like me, but sometimes you need to put your foot down and ensure that all of this protection that you're trying to put in place is not circumvented by the senior officials because they want to have their way. That's a fantastic point.
Just to say, the learning I have in the situation you just described, Ashel, is you don't want to say, no, sir, I'm not doing it. You say, yes, sir, but just remember when I do this, these are the risks that you're exposed to. Right? So your role is basically to advise them. They decide whether they want it or not. Right? But to just make sure that they know.
In writing, huh?
Oh, all right. Okay, in writing.
Make sure you have it in writing.
It's also advised. Just make sure that they know the risks. Yeah. Right?
Make sure you have it in writing. Log it in your safe. Take some pictures of it.
Is one of those things.
Okay.
Maybe just a comment. I think maybe it's a challenge for you to...
maybe it's a challenge for you to, let's say, to request from your boss, okay, you need to give me that in writing. But what you can do is you write basically what you have been discussing with him and send that to him. So this is what we have discussed with respect to that. So that's one of the approaches as well.
Yeah. Ria has a question. Ria, and okay. I think Ria put up. Ria put. Huh? Yeah, he deferred.
Thanks. Ria Yoching, Covella Foundation. Now, it's clear from Bevel's video and
is it on the mic?
Is it on? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And Albert's very example-rich presentation that this has gone significantly mainstream. Okay, so we accept that it's gone mainstream, and with the mainstream effect, there is a responsibility. If I go back to my own days of training my children on online security and so on, there is a mainstream level of or sets of resources for the general public, if you will, as you described it, in different sectors, in the school environment, in the home environment, as it relates to cyberbullying, anything, online behavior, that this now needs to be incorporated into. Both of you, all of you, all four of you spoke to the weakest link actually being human beings. And so my question is, how do we incorporate that mainstream effect, communication aspect of it, into this conversation, taking it away, let's say, not taking away our responsibility at an enterprise level, but beginning a much greater conversation or more expansive conversation that has already begun at the school level, at the tertiary institution level, to incorporate these examples. Because we don't actually know what we don't know. And it is funny, when you trade stories on cyberbullying, as people have begun to do, or online security matters, as people have begun to do, other people learn from it. Wow, I didn't realize it had gone that far, or that it has gone that far. But what I typically see is lots of jokes about ha ha ha, password 123, ha ha ha. But those very important examples, first lines of poetry, or just starting with a quote, anything would not have come naturally to my brain. How can we begin a more expansive conversation in this area?
Okay, so just like the security itself, you first look at the audience/target that you're trying to reach, and you do different things with different audiences, with different targets. First, there's work that the parents have to do at home. We seem to be falling down a bit generally in society with the job of the parent and what has to happen at home before the child leaves the home. And we now, many parents are expecting a lot of things that are supposed to be done by parents to be done by the teachers in the school. That is one. But obviously, the parents have to be taught. Okay, so there are certain initiatives, like there's one coming out of the Caribbean Cybersecurity Center called Think, Click, Surf. And it's meant to be a very simple, easy to understand, non-technical website that both parents and children can go to start understanding what some of the vulnerabilities are. Start understanding that when you get a website that says, now, click now, update your password now because we saw a bad transaction on your account. When you see that, it's supposed to put you in a certain frame of mind, realizing, well, no. As much as you are trying to impress urgency on me, since this is an email that is expressing some need for urgency, I should pause. I should look carefully, hover my mouse over the email address that it came from, and make sure that there's nothing in there that looks strange. Something that should be coming from PayPal, why is it coming from something.ccTLD, which has nothing to do with PayPal? In the case, for example, of ICANN, I mean, we get this internally all the time. We get fake emails sent to us by our own security staff where the email is trying to look like it came from ICANN, but instead of 2 N's, it has an M or it has 2 R's, something that would look like ICANN at the end. Because people do it all the time, and there are a lot of high-value assets that ICANN staff have access to. So we also have to be wary of our own behavior. So there can be things done for the parents, and then we can start thinking of how we integrate that into the school system. In companies, when an IT auditor goes into the company, and again, this is another reason why they don't like us, we look at the culture, the information security culture of the organization. What do we look for first? We look for an information security policy. Do you have in place as a company, and this can work for any company, do you have in place an information security policy that is signed off by the senior executives? Not the IT guy sat down and he put everything in there that he knows should be in there, and the managing director or CEO doesn't know anything about it. Has it been signed off by senior management? So then we look at that policy first and we see what's in there. Does it cover the use of USB drives? Does it cover the use of taking laptops home? Does it cover remote access? Does it cover everything that needs to be covered by an information security policy? Part 1. Then we go to the staff room or the kitchen and we start talking to staff. Do you know if your company has an information security policy? An information what? So you try to get from the staff some idea of whether they are familiar with the policy and the contents of that policy. And then the other thing that you look for is, do you have a formal, structured program of information security awareness? Are your staff required to sit in a room once a year for training? I have to do it at ICANN. If I don't sit through, it's 3 hours of security training once a year, every year, and not just sit through and put it on and let it run for 3 hours. After every 15 minutes, I have to take a little test to make sure that I'm actually understanding what I'm being told. If I don't do that every year, my contract is not renewed. It's as simple as that. So what I hope I've done is I've given you some snippets of different ways that you could deal with certain aspects of the problem. For the parent, for the child, integrating certain things into our educational system, and what you can also do in an organization. Have a proper information security policy that is well put together, ensure that it is communicated to the staff, ensure that they sign off saying that they agree to the policy. They agree that they will not take a USB drive from home and just stick it into the company's computer. They agree that they will not take their laptop home and let the 8-year-old use it to do homework and download all kinds of things and then come back on the network. So hopefully I've given you some examples of things that can be done to mitigate that particular issue. And this gentleman in the yellow tie, I think, also had a question.
Yes, Russell Jones, BVI. You mentioned about the DNSSEC dropping the packet in the event that it's not going to the correct address. Sometimes I see an alert that says that the site you're going to has the incorrect signature or no signature at all, and it'll block it out, say it's not secure, etc.
Yeah.
And people would scroll down and go there anyway. Is that a feature of DNS, or something needs to be fixed?
So
public be made aware?
Security, like I mentioned, comes in layers. And there are several layers, there are several things that are being done to try to protect us when we're using the internet. One of them is called SSL, the Secure Sockets Layer. And you may recall that on some sites, and I mentioned this, you see a little yellow padlock. And in the old days, once you saw that padlock, you used to feel safe, that I'm on a secure website, my information is not going to be stolen. Because what that padlock meant was that you had a secure connection from your computer to some other computer, because your browser would have technology that is checking this certificate that the website holder is publishing, and then if that certificate is valid, it would pop up the little yellow padlock. So what happens with those certificates is that from time to time they expire and you have to renew them, and they're not always renewed. So sometimes, I have to be careful what I say here, sometimes you can still be safe even if you go to our website, if you don't, if it says the certificate is not valid, because it could be that it has just expired. But understand that that is just one layer, the SSL layer. The problem with SSL, and the reason why you still need DNSSEC on top of SSL, is that with all of these certificates that can give you the yellow padlock, you have bad guys. So right now there are approximately 1,500 SSL certificate issuers. So rest assured that one bad guy can go to another bad guy selling certificates and get a certificate that will allow him to produce a little yellow padlock when you go to his hacker's website. So when Bevel is trying to go to his bank's website and he gets Vance's hacker website, he will see that little yellow padlock. Why? Because Vance has been able to go and buy a secure socket layer certificate from a bad guy. Oh, sorry, Vance left. Sorry, I've been pointing over there because that's where Vance was sitting. All right, so you need to be aware of these different levels, and then you operating at your own risk. If you've been told that something is wrong and you still go and click, then understand that you may be encountering a problem. But that by itself is not necessarily DNSSEC on its own. Carlton, I stopped twice. Carlton wanted to say something.
This is probably a exercise in looking out for unintended consequences and observe. Anybody's ever heard of the NIST publication 863? Okay, so you know what 863, you know, you've heard of the guy Bill Burr. He's the fellow who wrote 863, and he's the one who laid out, as it were, the corporate practice for passwords to do with, you know, you mix up the numbers of characters, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, oh, I see. So now that Jacqueline told you this is the thing about intended consequences. When they said that, it obscured everything that could have happened on the obverse side. So if you have a complex password, you may not remember it, you have to write it down. And if you write it down, you're going to have to store it someplace where you have easy access to it. And therefore, you actually, by that action, reduce overall the effectiveness of the intent of the original argument. And that is one of the things that you have to manage always in security matters, especially because we have differing capabilities at every single layer that Albert mentioned earlier on. And that is a key, Albert, to recognize that they're layers. And at every layer, there are the dependencies up and down, and then there are the characteristics of the layer. And so as we think about it, as we give advice about security, please remember that it comes in layers, and we must understand that there are layering dependencies, and the characteristics of each layer sometimes impact the ones further up or further down. It's very important for us when we talk about security to remember those things. Thanks.
Drinks? Drinks? Rum? Is that yes to the rum? Or
Ashel will close.
Tell us where we're going for drinks. Thank you very much for being such an engaged audience.
Well, thank you very much, basically, for staying the course. There wasn't anything that needed to be brought to the floor from online, was there? No, okay. Yes, thank you very much for staying the course for today. We are pretty much at the end of it. We've just thanked Mr. Albert Daniels for giving us that last bit of information. And basically for the day, we've had our introduction. We learned something about ICANN's policy development process and the ICANN, not community only, what's the three things? Ecosystem, I guess. ICANN ecosystem. We learned about the ICANN ecosystem. Community networks and net neutrality. I think that generated some good comments and discussion. We heard about cybersecurity this afternoon, and we're still here. We had a glimpse at the Eclipse, and we learned about DNSSEC. So I hope you feel that you had a fulfilling capacity building day, and that has primed our participation for the next 2 days, where in fact we would be looking for even more interaction from you and inputs into the workshop activities as well. Tomorrow, please God, I will
Nigel,
ask.
before you close, just one question on the last session. For
Albert?
For Albert, yes. And this is online, coming from Glenn McKnight. He's asking, how can participants get involved in ICANN's consumer trust and security working groups?
You're pointing at.
Okay, I was pointing at Carlton Samuels, who's actually on that working group. Okay, that's a very easy question. I can answer that very specifically. Talk to Carlton. Actually, no. There are several ways to get information on what's going on within ICANN. The ICANN website is structured in such a way where in the top right-hand corner, there is a search box. So once you go to icann.org, whatever topic that you want to get more information on, you simply type it in that search box. And typically, if you typed in the name of that particular working group or any other working group, for example, within ICANN, you will quickly and easily be able to get information. And also our team, the global stakeholder engagement team, our job is to engage the community. Like I said, we work for you. And if there's anything that you feel that you need more information on, anything that you feel that you need clarified, you're always able to contact us. And if we can't answer you immediately, we can do a little bit of research and get back to you with the full details. Usually, our addresses are our names with the dot. So my email address, for example, is albert.daniels@icann.org. So without going into the detail of that particular working group, which Carlton has some association with, I think that would be a good starting point and a very general way in which you can get information on anything from ICANN.
Okay, was that it? Okay. I was saying that tomorrow, please God, we'll have our formal opening because, as I said, today is more the capacity building day. Tomorrow we'll have our formal opening. So yes, we'll start with the national song and invocation again. And we should have on the speaker list the Honorable Mark Van Der Poel, who is the Minister of Communications and works for the Virgin Islands. So I understand that tomorrow the Virgin Islands is also swearing in a new governor at 10 o'clock. So we need indeed to finish our program as scheduled at about 9:45. All right, so I'll ask that everyone be prompt in the morning so that we can have a prompt start at 8:45 with the anthem and invocation, and we'll go quickly into the short words of greeting from our partners, sponsors, and so on, and finally from the minister. After the opening ceremony, we'll have a break, and in fact, we hope to take a group photo and have a break, and then we'll get into the program of the day, which would start with the the national and regional reports from Internet Governance Forum. All right, so have a good evening. No, don't have a good evening as yet. I should have gotten some information related to tomorrow evening. After the session tomorrow evening, there's supposed to be some networking activity, and Gary is just dashing quickly for maybe to get me a piece of paper. Yes. So while, yes, you're kind of, yes, they've, our local hosts are arranging a little networking activity after this session tomorrow at Tortola Pier Park, which is just a 2 minutes walk from here for, down that side for a little wine and finger food kind of gathering. But I'll give you more specifics on it tomorrow, please God. But just so that you know, don't make plans to run off tomorrow. Maybe on Wednesday, but tomorrow, please God, at least give us a little time. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing all of you on time tomorrow, please God, so that we can have our prompt start. Thank you.
Good job, Nigel. Fantastic.
I understand what you're saying. Like, would you not this to change your website? Because I always do that whenever I am on a website and I'm payment. I look to make sure it's the right